Welcome to another Explainer. Today we're jumping straight into an ancient textual mystery that's been echoing for nearly 2,000 years. We're looking at one of the most famous, heavily debated moments in historical and religious literature, the final cry of Jesus from the cross. But we're not just doing a surface-level read here. We're going to unpack the hidden literary world behind this one isolated sentence. As you'll see, a detail that seems incredibly small is actually the doorway to a massive historical and textual revelation. Let's get into it.
So right off the bat, we run into this huge information gap. Did you know that the final cry of Jesus, as it's preserved in the earliest texts, begins in a language that most English readers just entirely miss? The canonical Gospels were written in Greek, but right at the absolute climax of the narrative, the writers do something completely unexpected. They just stop translating. They drop a raw, foreign-sounding Semitic expression directly into the Greek text, forcing their original audience to literally stumble over these syllables before eventually giving them the translation. You've got to ask yourself, why would they do that? Why keep this one crucial sentence in its original transliterated form?
Part 1. The Untranslated Cry, a phonetic mystery in the Greek text. According to the Gospel of Mark, chapter 15, verse 34, at the 9th hour, the cry sounds like this, Eloi, Eloi, lema sabachthani. Just listen to the texture of those words. It's a transliterated Semitic phrase. Now, our goal here isn't to claim we have some kind of ancient audio recording of the exact first-century pronunciation. We don't. But we want you to hear the phonetic weight of that phrase, exactly as it was so carefully handed down by these ancient writers.
And this brings us to a brilliant detail about ancient manuscripts. In Mark, the text says, Eloi, Eloi. But if you flip over to Matthew 27:46, you get a near identical yet slightly different version, Eli, Eli. This is actually a fantastic historical detail. It proves we're dealing with a genuine ancient textual tradition passed down through handwritten copies, not some modern standardized phonetic script. Both of these Gospels are acting as independent historical witnesses to this really striking Semitic cry.
Part 2. 3 layers of meaning: human, textual, and historical.
Let's break this down, starting with the immediate human layer. A cry of pain is universal, right? It's instantly understandable no matter what culture or time period you're from. At its most basic, literal level, this is a raw expression of immense fear, totally crushing abandonment and deep suffering. You literally need zero scholarly background to feel the emotional weight of this moment.
But when we layer on the historical and textual dimensions, things get fascinating. Historically, this shows us that Mark and Matthew intentionally kept this Semitic-sounding form instead of just handing over the Greek translation their readers would have easily understood. And textually, which is the absolute coolest part we're about to explore, this specific wording carries an entirely older scriptural world along with it. It's a Greek text preserving a Semitic cry specifically to trigger an ancient memory.
Part 3. The Psalm 22 Connection. Opening an ancient text.
So right after dropping that Semitic phrase, both Mark and Matthew provide the Greek translation, which in English comes out to, my God, why have you forsaken me?" It's devastating. It's incredibly raw. But if you stop there, as a reader, you completely miss the massive narrative twist that the gospel writers just engineered.
Here is the absolute game changer. That sentence, it's not just a spontaneous cry of despair invented on the spot. It is, word for word, the exact opening line of Psalm 22, a famous ancient Jewish lament attributed to David. The gospel writers are deliberately using this final cry as a direct doorway into a much older existing biblical tradition.
Part 4. Anguish, Hope, and Praise, the literary movement of Psalm 22.
To really get this, we have to look at how Psalm 22 is built. It's an entire journey. It starts with step 1, the cry, my God, but it doesn't stay there. It evolves into step 2, remembrance, where the speaker remembers that their ancestors trusted God and were delivered. Then step 3 is petition, do not be far from me. By step 4, it shifts into deliverance, where the speaker actually expects an answer. And finally, step 5 is praise. The poem broadens completely outward into a grand, hopeful proclamation. It's a profound movement from total isolation all the way back to community and trust.
The real intellectual payoff here is realizing that while the cry from the cross sounds like this standalone sentence of absolute darkness, quoting that specific first line is an invitation. The text is literally inviting the audience to pull in the entire emotional arc of that larger psalm. The darkness gives way to light. So you're hearing this scene on 2 levels at once. a very real human cry of suffering, and simultaneously the invocation of an ancient prayer that actually ends in hope and praise.
Part 5. Historical and textual accuracy. What the sources actually say.
Now, when we're dealing with historical texts, we have to establish some firm guardrails. We absolutely cannot claim we know exactly which dialect Jesus spoke here, as if someone had a microphone. And we definitely shouldn't claim he recited the entire 31-verse psalm out loud on the cross. We have to stick to the verified facts. The Gospels preserve a Semitic language form and transliteration, and that text explicitly quotes the opening of the psalm, creating a broader literary link. We always want to separate what the text actually says from what later scholars or interpretations might infer.
Honestly, when you stick strictly to the historical evidence, the reality is way more compelling than any sensational exaggeration. The true fascination is seeing exactly how the gospel writers framed this climactic scene. They took a deeply verified literary connection and used it to communicate this incredibly complex meaning to their readers, layering an ancient tradition right over a visceral historical execution.
Part 6. An entire tradition. The doorway to a prayer.
To wrap this all up, let's look at 3 core pillars. First, the message. The cry is preserved in a Semitic form that translates to a highly relatable, human expression of feeling totally forsaken. Second, the discovery. This exact phrase deliberately triggers Psalm 22, turning one sentence into a massive encounter with an ancient lament. And third, the takeaway. What we really want you to remember is this incredibly intricate relationship between voice, text, language, and literary context.
Just take a second and let that sink in. One sentence, an entire tradition behind it. That is the magic of textual history. What looks at first glance like a simple, agonizing end is actually a highly sophisticated literary doorway. It's not just a quote. It's an invitation to walk directly into an ancient prayer, one that transforms suffering into the ultimate expectation of deliverance. Which leaves us with a pretty provocative question to end on. If just a few transliterated words in a Greek manuscript can carry the weight of an entire, evolving, ancient poem of anguish and praise, what other ancient traditions might be hiding in plain sight within these historical narratives? Next time you're reading a foundational text, ask yourself, what is the author leaving untranslated? And what older world are they secretly inviting you to discover? Keep looking closer, and thanks for exploring this with us today.